Welcome everyone. This is the session about talking about disability, the employer perspective. We have a range of fantastic speakers here today, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more from them. I thought it might be helpful if we started just by getting some introductions. Just to say to everyone, I'm Karen. I'm a disability specialist, careers and employability consultant at Liverpool John Moores University. Now, if I can hand over to Brooke, do you mind just telling us a little bit about who you are, who you work for, anything else you'd like to tell us just now? Yeah, particularly about your story, if you're happy to. Yeah,
good afternoon. Thanks to everyone for joining us. It's going to be an interesting session. My name is Brooke. I am the head of HR and operations for the Red Balloon Educational Trust. We support students who can't attend mainstream school because of bullying and trauma, and a lot more of what we're seeing is in relation to things like anxiety. We're seeing a lot more neurodivergence in the students that are coming through to us. We have 5 centres in the Red Balloon on the Air provision, which delivers predominantly online. I have a disability. I was involved in an accident a couple of years ago, and my right leg's paralysed from the knee down due to spinal damage. Following that, I also had PTSD and anxiety and depression, and so I've had to flip my entire career the other way around because to kind of cope with that. But now it's definitely something that I embrace, and so it's really nice to be able to kind of be here today to talk to you from both sides of the coin, I guess, to say, as someone that's worked with employees, talking about their disabilities and how to support them from the recruitment process right through kind of anything that they need to be supported with, but also, you know, I'm happy to be very transparent about my own experience.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Nice to meet you again. Madeline, or do you go by Maddie? Do you mind me coming to you next?
Yeah, of course, Madeline or Maddie, either is fine. I'm from KPMG. We're a professional services firm, and I work within the student recruitment team, specifically with outreach and attraction, and really passionate about making sure that our process is as accessible as it possibly can be, and supporting students that apply with us, and then go on to join the firm. So pleased to be here, and really looking forward to hearing more from the panel and all your fantastic questions later on.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Dottie, do you mind me coming to you next?
No, of course not. So I'm Dottie. I work for the Jackson Lees Group. I am head of employment experience, which basically covers equality, diversity, inclusion, and the whole employee life cycle. So when we first attract somebody to the business, right the way through to when they leave us, ensuring that they have a positive and comfortable experience with us whilst they're in our employment.
Thank you. Now, your company is part of the Make a Positive Difference, MAPD, yes, is that right?
Yeah. So our parent company is the MAPS Group, which stands to Make a Positive Difference. We are very, very passionate in supporting employees who have disabilities, neurodiversity issues, a number of things that fit in between both of those key phrases that we're going to use today. I totally agree with Karen that I don't like the language that surrounds disabilities and impairments, and I think it can be changed in the future. But we are so unbelievably passionate about making a change in the legal industry because we've noticed that there is a huge gap there, and we're trying to make some waves to try and see a difference.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Abigail, can I come to you next, please?
Yeah, of course. So, hi everyone, I'm Abby. I work for a social enterprise in Liverpool city centre called Farm Urban. We grow lettuce underground. And we also have learning programmes that we deliver across the city and across the UK. So we are a disability confident employer, and we met with Karen recently, and we're keen to share our experiences in employing a variety of people of all different abilities. So yeah, we're excited to share that with you today.
Thank you. Never heard of growing lettuce underground until I spoke to you last week. That's fantastic. Rachel, please, do introduce yourself as well. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Rachel Hoots-Page. I also work at Farm Urban. I'm the lead learning program developer, and I'm a disabled person who works in the company. So I'm living evidence that we are disability confident. And I also had never heard of growing different varieties of lettuce, different things underground until my friend Abby worked at this company. So yeah, excited to share that with you all.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks very much. So what I'm going to do is go on to the first question, and happy to take sort of volunteers if that's all right, to who would like to answer it. But so do speak up if that's all right. The first question that we thought that we as careers practitioners get asked quite a lot is students are wondering what would happen next if I told you that I had a disability and I was applying for a job with you. Kind of what happens when I tell you that, and if you have any examples, then that would be really helpful as well. Shall I pick on something? Is that helpful?
I'm happy to jump in.
Thank you, thanks. It's always hard, that, sorry.
It's always the first question, isn't it? So for us at KPMG, if we get the information either via email, you give us a call, the next step is really, right, this is our process, this is the next step in the process for us. How does that work for you? This is, what's already in place in terms of, our online assessments are compatible with screen readers. There's no time, so you can go back and forth and look again. There's kind of auto descriptions on everything. There's closed captionings. So this is what's in place. What else can we do to make sure that you can access that? How can we support? Do you need some more information on kind of what's next? So that would kind of be the initial discussion, is making sure the person we speak to has got all the information that they need to understand if there's anything additional that we need to put in place. Moving forward, we'd have the same conversation for any other stages that you might get to, and that will all be with one point of contact. So you're not having to go and kind of give all this backstory to loads of people who aren't kind of involved in the process. So all we need, and we don't need any of your medical information, we really just need to know how can we support, what are the barriers that we might come up against, and how can we help you there. So that, I think, is probably the key thing as well. I would want people to feel comfortable. They don't need to kind of give us a huge, we don't need to know. This is just, all we need to know is how we can support. Trying to think of a really good example. We had a student who had a visual impairment and really thought they might not be able to access one of the assessments that we had. After having some conversation, it was actually, he was really comfortable with what was next and went on to kind of go through that process. Whereas when we get to our launch pad, which is our final stage, which is all kind of through teams, we have, had occasions where we just have a quick chat beforehand for students who might be potentially a bit anxious about the process. That might include telling your interviewer. We had someone with a speech impediment and they just wanted the kind of confidence to know that the person they were going to be speaking to already had this information. So it's just almost kind of putting your mind at ease. So that's kind of what happens next. Also, we don't then keep that information as well, which is the other thing. So it doesn't affect, how you're then going to be rated or scored through the process. It's just making sure we can even that playing field for you to access our process.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Anyone else want to share? I'm wondering, Rachel, if you don't mind me suggesting, you had quite a sort of helpful sort of like story around what happened when you and how you came to be working at Farm Urban and what happened once you started there.
Yes, thank you. I shared this when we met with Karen last week, that I've actually been working as a self-employed person, sort of out of the mainstream career structure for 8 years or so, and it's only through my pre-existing relationship, my friendship with Abby, that this sort of occurred as a job that might really suit me. And I actually didn't mention that I had health issues until actually during the interview itself. And essentially, I didn't present it very smoothly or professionally. I made jokes about being a spoonie and had to explain what that was. And just didn't really present myself very strongly because I was quite intimidated about what they might say or how they might react. But mentioning it during the interview process meant that I was able to see that they're very understanding, very inclusive. And it also meant that it was taken into consideration when we were talking about specific details about contractual hours, responsibilities that I might be sort of taking on in the role. And in my case, Farm Urban agreed to a part-time contract, which they hadn't originally advertised, but they were very happy to make for me. And also for me to work completely remotely, which is something that they were already doing before COVID. But I think now that's even more accessible in lots of places. But I'm very fortunate that they were already very set up for that. And it also meant that in my sort of capacity as a learning program developer, that I would be able to deliver training and deliver support without attending in person, which meant that, again, I could work completely remotely. And it really just sort of suited my needs, whilst they still acknowledged that I was the best candidate for the job. But just they were able to still make those accommodations. So yeah, that was really helpful.
Thank you. Can I just ask for you to explain, for anyone who might not know here, the spoonie phrase?
Yes.
Because I was thinking, what is she talking about?
So it's a very helpful philosophy that I heard about, and I've completely forgotten the name of who it's attributed to, but if you Google the spoon theory, you'll be able to find that out. But essentially, it measures out it's a simple way of explaining the energy that you start with during the day. And if you're a neurotypical person, if you're a type of person who doesn't experience chronic illness or health issues or things like that, it's the idea that you have exponential amounts of spoons and you can grab a spoon to do a task at any point during the day. Whereas those of us who experience chronic illness, or we have different neurodivergencies or things like that, it means that we have a set number and we have to be very careful about how we apportion our energy, and also that different tasks might require different different numbers of spoons. And it's just a kind of simple way of explaining to somebody that I'm someone who has a very limited amount of resources or energy. I need to be careful how I attribute those, how I use those. And also it might take me more time than it would for a different person to recover quickly. And so it's kind of similar to being an extrovert versus an introvert. You might say that an introvert needs to be at home in a small space, not small space, I guess solo space, in order to recover that energy, whereas an extrovert needs to be with other people. It's not really a description of a positive or a negative. It's just something that's required for you to be your best self.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Abby, did you want to add anything about the farm urban sort of perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that we decided that we'd offer to try and make our recruitment as accessible as possible is supported employment placements, because particularly we've got a few members of staff who were unemployed for a very long time before they started working for Farm Urban, and that can be really intimidating when you start in a new workplace if you've been out of work for a long time. Because when you're kind of signing a contract, you can feel, am I ready for this? I'm not sure that I'm prepared, things like that. So we decided to offer supported employment placements where people have the opportunity to do a 6-week trial with us, where they can see if they like the organisation, if they think it works for them, but also we can obviously see how we can best support them as well. So we do that. We also, with all of our employees, definitely not just if they disclose that they've got a disability, with all of our employees, we say we do a personal support plan. So this could cover anything from, I'm actually moving house at the moment. It's really stressful, it's really chaotic, and so I might be really struggling with that. I've got 2 children, they're in different schools across the city from each other, so sometimes I can struggle to get to work on time because I'm dropping them off. Or I have a disability and this is how it affects my day-to-day. So with those personal support plans, we do an assessment when someone's first hired, to see what support we can give or if there's any barriers we can overcome together. And then in our reviews, we try and revisit them and say to anyone who has any support needs, how's that going? Is the support that you've got in place adequate, or is there anything else that we can do? So that's some of the ways that we try and support all members of staff and those with disabilities.
Thank you. Thanks very much. That's really helpful. Thank you. Brooke or Dottie, did you want to add anything to this question, which was, what will happen next after I share my disability with you, the information about it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, to add on to what everybody's saying there, we're pretty similar in how we want to support our employees. We're really open with our communication, and how we recruit is completely different to other law firms. So we don't have a structured approach to recruitment, even though we do recruit lawyers. So we have something called a map chat. So we'll put an advert out there. We're specific with what we want, as in how many years experience are you, or if you're a lawyer, or if we're looking for a support member of staff or an operations member of staff. We then have a map chat. So as many candidates who come through to us, we will ask them, is there anything that we can do to help you get the best out of yourself in this interview? Which usually prompts the conversation of, well, I have hearing issues with my hearing, my sight, I'm neurodivergent, I've got ADHD, so can we do a walk-in conversation? Is it okay if we're in a bigger room? Is it okay if we're in a room that's quite quiet due to sound triggers? Our map chat is held by two of our associates within the business. Now, these aren't associate solicitors. These are people, we have our own internal associates and associate directors, and they could be anybody across the business. These are advocates for the firm, basically. These two people will not know who you are, what role you're coming for, what level you're coming for, what department you're coming for. You will be then put through a conversation with somebody to find out who you are as a person, if you'll fit in the business rather than an individual role and an individual department, and if you pass that map chat. So if you fit our core values, which is kindness, basically, we employ everybody based on kindness. If you fit into those core values, then we'll take you through to interview. During that period between the map chat and the interview, we'll ensure that we have as much information from you as possible. So if at the map chat you said that you prefer a walk-in interview, or walk-in map chat, then we'll try and accommodate that as much as possible, whether that's around our office building, which is absolutely huge, or if it's a nice day, we'll go outside. Sometimes if it's a technical interview, we'll do the technical side separately to the actual questions and answers. So we do try and accommodate people as much as possible through the interview process. So if you tell us about your condition, your impairment, your disability, then we will absolutely try and support you as best as possible.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Thanks very much. Now, the map chat, is that the MAPD, the Make a Positive Difference, which is the name of the group? Yeah, thank you. Fantastic.
Sorry. Yeah. Be a bit more clear with that. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Brooke, I wanted to not leave you out of this question. Would you like to add anything?
I could probably pitch in another bit. I think ultimately across the board it is about understanding the adjustments that you need to support you. I think I agree with everything everybody else said. I think that Abigail specifically, when you're talking about, we have something similar in relation to mental health, and the fact of the matter is that every human has mental health, and I think it's changing the stigma around that, and that's something I've worked quite a lot on from that kind of, if it's in that zone of disability, that we all have mental health, and how can we support that, whether it be because you're moving house or you've got loads of kids and you're busy, or because you actually have a mental illness that we need to support with. So I think it's nice to hear other organisations doing that, but also with the values-based approach as well, Dottie. I think that's very much kind of where we sit, and I suppose it kind of goes into lots of the other bits of questions that you have, but there's a lot of legal things around that I think people should kind of be aware of when they're going ahead for things, about what your rights are. Yes. It's quite important. But I don't want to go off on a tangent, because that's easy to do.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you. I might start with you on the next question, Brooke, if that's right, which is, sorry, if you don't mind, feel free to say, hang on a minute. Do students have to share information about disability during the recruitment process with Red Balloon?
So I suppose this is where I then mash my experience with the legal side of it. So in the role that I'm in now, so we as an organisation don't submit CVs. You have a statement of application where you can basically write a bit of an essay that says, this is who I am, what I'm about, do my values match with yours, a bit like Dottie's map conversation. But the first paragraph that I put in my statement of application was, I have a disability. It does not define me. It enhances me in a way which differentiates and strengthens me. My disability should be viewed as an ability to see the world in a different way. I had an accident. This has left me with a permanent but very manageable physical disability. So I went straight in and went, do you know what, this is part of me and I'm going to embrace it. And then I had the whole rest of it to be like, but this is why I would love to do this job. And I think this was the first job I was applying for, having had to completely realign my entire career. And I was seeing the world in a different way because I could tap into all these new things. So you don't have to, that's the point. But I think if you embrace it and see it as a benefit and use it as a skill. I mean, I use my high functioning anxiety as a great skill. My employers know that we need to watch it and manage it, but actually I can be the most productive person because that's how I function in that part of what I'm dealing with. Legally, though, it is unlawful for an employer to discriminate you in the hiring process for having a disability. And if an employer is made aware of your disability during your application, they'll be able to make sure they make reasonable adjustments for you at interview, and they'll start to be able to understand any adjustments if you were offered the job. But furthermore, if they were unaware of your disability, they can't be deemed to have been discriminatory against you. So I suppose in a situation, an example, what I mean is that if I apply for a job and I state that I have a disability, but I match all of the essential requirements for that role, if I then don't get called for an interview and I then find out that somebody with lesser qualifications who didn't have a disability got a call up and went for that role, that from the very get-go is against the Equality Act, and that company can be done for discrimination without even interviewing you in the first place. So if you're confident in having the conversation right up, then you're kind of putting, and I suppose it goes back to all this diversity and inclusion that Dottie deals with, and actually it can be seen as a benefit, but don't be scared of it in the same right, because if you're confident of going, do you know what, that is my job and I love it and I've got all the experience and it's great, if you disclose you have disability and then you find out that you don't get through, then actually that's kind of on them and they would need to kind of answer the question. If you went, hi, I need to know specifically why I didn't have an interview, because on my understanding on the job description, I passed all your essential criteria. So I suppose it puts you in a good standing that it's illegal for an employer to not give you an interview. Yes. If you meet all the essential requirements. Sorry, I'm rambling, but you get where I'm going with it. Really and it's something that I'm quite passionate about, and so I am about disclosing early, because, and don't be scared of it. Sorry, I can go off.
Yeah, we've got a few nods from others. Does anyone else want to come in on this? I guess the question is, do students have to share about their disability? The short answer is no, isn't it? They don't have to at any time. It's yeah, but if there's a chance that it's going to be seen, you can describe it as a positive if it's going to add to, which in so many cases, like you've just said, it's a real, sort of a chance to show that you've got even more to offer than many other candidates. But it's up to you when you share as well, isn't it? But does anyone else want to add anything? Brooke, you've given a really comprehensive answer. Yep, Rachel, thank you.
I'll hop in. I really feel a lot of what Brooke's saying and really agree. Because actually I've worked in lots of different careers. I was a teacher, I was an administrator, I've been a freelance writer, all these different things, and I'd never mentioned my health issues to employers before Farm Urban, and there's lots of reasons for that, but my biggest factor was really being more concerned about getting the job and sort of being motivated by I need to get the job, rather than considering actually would I do the job well without disclosing. And I think for me pardon me, I think there are lots of reasons to consider, lots of factors to consider. Only you know whether it's something that you want to disclose, if it's something that you want, and only select people. It's not something you need to tell everybody, but certainly when you come to a job role, if it's something that's important to you and is going to affect your life, it is kind of, I think, in your best interest to bring it and put it on the table to begin with. And especially because, I mean, interviews aren't just about them knowing who you are. It's also about you knowing who the business is and what their environment is like. And I know for me, I got an immediate insight into Farm Urban's preparedness, and their initial response told me a lot about the kind of working environment that I was going to be working in. And I think about the jobs that I've had before where I really failed because they weren't set up to make accommodations for me, because I had no idea of the mental health struggles that I was having, because I was much younger and much more sort of, I felt the stigma around it. And actually, I wonder if I would have lasted longer in that job, if I would have had a pleasant time, if there would have been more sort of support there available for me if I put it on the table to begin with. And ultimately, there are some places that you're not going to gel, you're not going to like the environment that they have there. And I think it's in your best interest to know that from the get-go. And obviously that comes with, if you have the luxury of, getting lots of interviews and being able to pick where you want to work. But I think ultimately your health should in many ways be your priority. And I think prioritizing your well-being is in many ways the more important thing when you come to interview, rather than just getting a job for the sake of a period of time or money.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks very much. That's helpful, really helpful. Thank you. I have another question for you all, if that's okay. What if a candidate doesn't have paperwork with the official diagnosis of a disability or a neurodivergent condition? What do employers want to see to prove a disability? That's a question that, we sometimes get asked. What will I need to show? What if I don't have anything to show? Does anyone want to come back on that one?
I'm happy to. Sorry, Brooke, after you.
Madeline, no, I was just saying. I don't have to show anything.
Madeline and then Brooke.
Exactly that. We don't need any proof. We don't need to see doctor's notes. In fact, we don't want to. Please keep, you don't need to share all of that information. All we need to know is what is the adjustment we need to make? How can we support? We really, please don't feel because I know we speak to a lot of students and they're really worried and concerned about how much information. I haven't got this doctor's note, or I haven't got, all X, Y, Z. All we need to know is how we can support. So please, hopefully that puts some people's kind of minds at ease.
Thank you.
That's all we need.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Brooke, is that what you were going to say as well? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. That was a shorter answer unless anyone else has anything to add on that. But I think I'm seeing agreement. Abby?
Just one thing to add. I completely agree with everything Madeline said. Is that we quite often get people on courses that we do, and it's definitely been discussions in recruitment before as well, of I think I have a disability, but it's never been diagnosed. And I think that's absolutely brilliant when people still disclose that. Because if you think you have ADHD, then it means that you identify with all of the characteristics of someone who has been diagnosed with ADHD. So that's still relevant for us to know, because we can make the same adjustments for you as we would if someone came to us and said, I have ADHD. So I think if you haven't got a diagnosed condition, but you're pretty sure you do, obviously, it's wise to say that it's not been diagnosed, but this is what I think, kind of I relate to a lot in some of the symptoms of this. I'd still really encourage you to actually discuss that with your employer, because they can still just make the same adjustments for you. So we do deal with quite a lot of that, and they're still very welcoming of it.
Thank you. You've actually answered my next question, which is fantastic, which is sometimes students have a recent diagnosis, or perhaps even not had that diagnosis but suspect, haven't worked out what it means to them. And how would you feel about conversation about, I'm not sure? Yeah, so exactly. Thank you, Abby. You've completely answered that. I was going to just say, do you have any examples just for here, either Abby or anyone, of just where that's actually happened, and what has been put in place for that person? Or
we've got a current example for an employee at the moment who's believes that they have ADHD, undiagnosed, can get absolutely nowhere with the NHS, which is so disappointing. Being told to go privately, it costs an absolute fortune. This person straight out of university can't afford to go through that report process of over nearly £1,000, never mind the medication that comes with it. So we've sent them over to a neurodiverse specialist in occupational health, who doesn't diagnose but can confirm the traits, and then can also give co-coaching to that person's line manager, to the individual, lots of self-awareness, tells us how we level them up, what do we need to do to support them to move forward. And it's been a breath of fresh air to just be able to help this one individual, because we know that they've been struggling, very particularly in RSD as well, which is how they receive feedback. And sometimes it can be really, really damning to them when it's constructive feedback. So how we've got around that and how we now work moving forward, it's a completely different person that we're working with. And it's just amazing to see what one appointment over the telephone with somebody has helped. So it's been really, really powerful.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Did you call it co-coaching? Is that when it's for, yeah. What does that involve?
The specialist coach will have a coaching session with the team leader, line manager, head of department, and also the employee to understand, observe these different traits, and how the line manager then feeds back and manages, basically moving forward.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you. And really good to hear that it's made a positive difference to use your own company. It really has in this case. Yeah, thank you. That's fantastic. Thanks. Another question is, have you ever been asked for an adjustment that you haven't been able to provide? Because the legal term is reasonable adjustments, which I'm not sure I really like. There are many in the disability community that say, well, that implies some adjustments that we might ask for aren't reasonable. But actually, maybe there are limits. I don't know if anyone has any examples. It's a bit of a difficult question, perhaps.
I think so far we haven't had a situation where we haven't been able to meet the adjustments that someone's needed. I think one of the more difficult teams potentially for accessibility is the actual farm team. So like I said, we've got our learning programs and our education teams, and Rachel is our head of learning development, so she does all of that remotely, and any adjustments that she needed have been pretty easy to overcome. However, on the farm, it's a lot of manual labour. So obviously that's it. There's only so far you can adjust that for the sake of kind of it's quite a large system, and you've got to be able to lift, and you've got to be able to clean and things like that. We've still been surprised by that. We did have an employee who was one-handed for a while, and when they started, we were interested and to hear from them about how they thought that some of the tasks would be for them. And it was actually fine. And there were certain tasks that they couldn't do, but when we were factoring that into the day-to-day operations of the farm, the tasks that they couldn't do, someone else just did, and they did more of the tasks that they could do. So that was quite easily overcomable. So yeah, we haven't yet. I anticipate that in the future there might be someone who has needs that the organisation, because of the specific requirements of growing and harvesting and dealing with produce, they might not be able to do it. But I think that the important thing, and it comes back to the 6-week placements that we offer as well, the supported employment placements. We would never as an organisation want to look at a CV, look at an application and think, oh no, we don't think that will work. I think we'd always like to ask someone how they think it could work, and then maybe trial them coming on the farm and experiment a bit. I think that's something that's really important to us, is that we, like Dottie was saying before, we do values-based employment. So if someone has got a shared vision and a shared passion for what we're doing, which is growing food in a sustainable way, that tends to outweigh the specifics of a role description. So quite often we've hired someone, regardless of whether they have a disability or not, and 6 months in, we're like, you know what, you don't actually fit that job we originally hired you for, but we've noticed that you're really skilled and really passionate in this area, and they end up, their job description changes. So I think it's really important to, when someone has that shared passion and the same values, to give them a chance. And it has worked so far. I anticipate that it probably won't always work in the future, but I think it's just giving people that shot at first and working out with them how you can overcome barriers.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I was thinking that access to work has a part to play here, doesn't it? I don't know if any of you have experience or an example of when access to work has really helped you to put something in place for someone.
I've used Access to Work personally.
That's really
So following my accident, I engaged with the Access to Work scheme. And
actually, Brooke, just that, sorry to interrupt you. Would you be able to explain what it is? I'm just thinking there might be some people here. That's my error for not actually explaining what it was when I asked the question.
So that Access to Work scheme helps you to stay in work and get to work if you have a disability. So it's a government scheme, and it can help you stay in work and get to work, I suppose. For me, it was physically getting to work. I could no longer drive, but I wanted to stay at work. So I basically got taxis for oh, thanks, Rachel. Yeah, there you go. And yeah, so it was really simple. I was at work at the time, so all I needed to do was get a letter from my doctor to confirm that the reason that I couldn't get a bus was because I couldn't walk, and therefore I got all of my transport paid for by the government to get me to and from work. I think I paid like a little bit, like a little percentage, but a grant. You can also get grants that help you with practical support for your work. They can help you manage your mental health at work, but you can also have support during job interviews and things. So if you do need interpreters or adaptations and things, then the government scheme will support you in the Access to Work side of things, if that makes sense.
Yes, really does. Thank you. Thanks, that's helpful. Dottie, were you going to add anything? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Sorry.
No, not at all. You look like you might sort of add something, but if not, say no. I might have read that wrong.
Yeah, we've used Access to Work a number of times. We're currently on the wait list because I don't know if you all know, there's a 20-week wait at the moment, which is really disappointing. But obviously that's because of everybody coming back to work after COVID and having to go through the Access to Work scheme. It's fantastic what they can do. We've got a couple of individuals in our business who are registered as blind. We've got so many fantastic gadgets to help these individuals do their roles. So talking computers, talking pens, dictation, dragon dictation, all things like that. So we've got lawyers who are registered as blind who are still able to do the day-to-day role. It's adaptation from our side as well as theirs. So Access to Work has been able to help with the funding for all of this wonderful kit that we've got. And if it wasn't for them, then these individuals wouldn't be able to continue in the business. So we're absolutely made up. Actually, one of our fabulous employees has just resigned because their site is actually deteriorating. So they've resigned after being with us for 4 years, but they've just bought a camper van and they want to go around the UK and see all of the wonderful sites that they can before the vision completely goes. So whilst I'm absolutely devastated to see her go, I'm so happy that she's able to go and do this. But it just goes to show that she's been able to crack on as normal with slight adaptations here or there, whether it's a keyboard or different screens on the monitors and things like that. So it's really, really handy. But if you don't know about it, you should really have a look at it because it's fantastic what they can help with.
Thank you so much. I do find that there's quite a lot of students and graduates who aren't aware of this. And I mentioned at the start to some people, and some people have joined, that I've developed hearing loss over the last few years due to COVID. And so I'm actually going through the process myself, and there has been, you do have to be patient because it takes quite a while, but I'm about to receive some of these exciting gadgets that will speak to my hearing aid and things like that. So I'm also feeling like it's great that the government offers this funding to help, to make sure that employers can provide that supportive environment that some of us need. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I don't know if does anyone want to answer this question. Have you ever worried about doing the wrong thing when a student or a graduate, an applicant tells you that they have a disability? This is quite a challenging question as well. I don't know if anyone has ever worried. I would say from my perspective as a careers practitioner, especially when I was quite new to having the disability specialism, I used to be quite fearful of conditions I hadn't heard of. And of course, to start with, you can't have heard of everything. And actually, what I learned was that actually it didn't matter if I knew about it or not. actually what I just need to do as the student, or tended to, was likely to know a lot more than me. And so to ask them, well, how does this affect you? And kind of then talk about options together. But so I certainly have experienced that myself. I don't know about anyone else here.
Yeah, definitely. I think as, working in early careers, you just want to make sure that everyone has the most positive experience of your process, of your company as they possibly can. I think definitely kind of what we have found as a team is it's empowering our people to understand our process, because I think you're exactly right, Karen. We cannot be experts in every condition. And obviously there's 101 ways that each condition might present for someone, and what that means for an individual. So really it's our role to make sure we understand our process and what we can do and how we can support, and how we interact with every single one of our candidates, and making sure that everyone is having the most positive experience, because the last thing we want is for someone to be so worried about saying the wrong thing that they say nothing at all. So I think that's been the key thing for us as a team and as an organisation. It's just engaging with people on a one-to-one level.
Thanks. Was there anyone else who wanted to add anything to that one? Shall I move on to the next one? Abby, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to reflect what Madeline said, really. I do get worried, certainly. I get worried with any employee about how we might have different life experiences and how I might not understand theirs, and how to make sure that I communicate in a way that makes them feel comfortable and safe in our environment. But the more experience I have as a manager, the less worried I definitely become, because I think one of the main things I worry about is causing offence through something that I don't know yet. However, I'm constantly learning about new terminology and research about disability. So I know I'll get things wrong, largely because language around these topics evolves so quickly. And we all have different experiences that affect our day-to-day lives. So I think we just need to be patient with each other. It's not acceptable to not try to be inclusive in our language and practice, but it is human to make mistakes. And I think that as long as we're prepared to learn from them, and be open when someone challenges us, rather than defensive, then I think that that's really all we can ask. So I feel less worried about it the more experience I gain, but I think it's natural to be worried from any side of this, really. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. A question that we sometimes get is around what stage should we be telling you as the employers, the recruiters, that have a disability? When is it a good time? Now, we've kind of touched on this a little bit in terms of what we've said already around, it depends, ever have to say. But do you have any other sort of thoughts or examples of actually in terms of the timing of sharing information about a disability or health condition? I think maybe this is something we've covered already. Yeah,
I would just add one thing to it. Timing, it's as kind of I think we've touched on, is whenever it's comfortable for you, as Rachel said earlier. But I think something else that I would also put out there is that, using Rachel's example, that when she did kind of disclose and have the conversation, it didn't quite go as she expected it to. And sometimes it's easier to put it in writing and send it to them in advance. So that can be, so if you get an offer of an interview, maybe just putting an email together to kind of where you can stop and you can know exactly what you're saying. It's also about the how to disclose sometimes, because you can get really tongue-tied and not want to have to talk about it. But actually, if you want to make sure that they know that you want to be having a walking meeting, or that you need a bigger space, or what you need, sometimes it's easy about how you communicate it as much as when you communicate it is the only other thing I would tag on to that. It might make you feel more comfortable to have that more distant conversation before you get to the face-to-face bit, so you've already gone over that hurdle.
Really helpful, thank you. Getting lots of nods from the panel as well. Just following on from that, is it ever too late to share information about disability? Elsie, you're shaking your head.
No, it's absolutely not. And we've just recently had one of the directors of the MAPD group share with us that they've been diagnosed with ADHD, which was in September of last year. Since the diagnosis, she says that it feels as though she's had glasses put on, so she can see exactly what that means to her now. She has obviously been masking for so long, and we had no idea. But then that's helped us create internal training, internal awareness, making the language different around what we say about certain people. So yes, one individual may be full of energy at certain points, but there's no need to point that out to them. It's quite discriminative. Let's not make a point out of saying that this person's jumping around one moment and then the next moment they can't even string a sentence together. It's the way that their brain works. Us neurotypical people, some people don't understand that, and it's taken us an awful lot of knocking at the door of this, trying to get people to understand that neurotypical and neurodiverse are completely different, but we're all human. So we all need to understand each other. So we need to talk about it and we need to communicate about it. And the more that we do, the better. But since this one individual has been so open and so unbelievably brave about sharing their experience across LinkedIn, social media, they've had so many people apply to our business, fall into the DMs of LinkedIn asking where they got the courage from, how, any advice, what can they do to support others. You know, it's been fantastic, the response. So it's never too late, but if you do want that support from the moment you work somewhere and you want to be understood, then the sooner the better. But of course, like what Brooke says, as soon as you're comfortable to share that, then definitely do.
That was so helpful. Thank you. We've got a question from Catherine, one of the fellow careers practitioners. Catherine, do you want to?
I'd come in on that actually. I had with a case study of a client that I worked with a few years ago who had got an internship at one of the big city consultancy firms, and this particular client had quite severe dyslexia, which involved processing difficulties, and they chose not to tell the firm during the internship, and they really struggled because they didn't have the accommodations that they needed. Communications weren't given in the way that they needed. And then right at the very end, when they're having sort of the exit interview, the chat right at the end, evaluating your internship, they told them. And the firm was very kind, but said, you know, if you told us right at the beginning, we could have done this and this and this, and your whole experience would have been much better. And we could have taken you through to the graduate scheme on the basis of the internship. Because essentially they'd struggled so much and they didn't thrive in the internship, they couldn't then take them through to the graduate scheme in the usual way. And the person had to then apply for the graduate scheme and go through the whole process again. So I'm not saying they should have done, because they obviously weren't ready to talk to a big corporate firm about their disability, but it would have been beneficial if they had. And in an ideal world, all the processes at any firm would suit everybody with a disability. Of course they would, but disabilities vary so widely that they can't adjust constantly for every possibility that might be coming. So when you're considering talking to a firm, just think about what the benefits to you will be. And my general rule of thumb is to disclose and have that conversation, A, when you're ready, but B, when you really need something. And if you aren't thriving and you're really struggling in something like an internship, and you recognize that there are reasons for it and there are things that they could do to help you, have that conversation. If you're already in an internship, they aren't going to turn around and say, off you go, there's the door. They're going to have the conversation and try and support you. So that little case study is just to emphasize the benefits of disclosing and having that conversation at a point when the firm can still support you, not at the very end when it might be a little bit late. I'll back away again.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you so much, Catherine. That's really helpful to have. Sometimes to have those examples, is that's what you remember, isn't it? So yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Just another question for you all, if that's okay. Do you have any thoughts when, or if and when a candidate was to use their disability as an example of answering, say, an interview question? Sometimes students ask, is that something I should do or not? I don't know if you can think of any times when someone's done that, they've used it as to evidence their certain type of skill.
Yeah, happy to jump in here. I think as we've kind of all said in echoing, if you want to, absolutely use any and all experiences that you want to share, and that will illustrate your point. So like all the employers here, we use a strengths-based recruitment process. So those are things like resilience, communication, working in collaboration, all of those things that often you will have had to do at some point. If you have a disability that, you're having to explain to people often, you're honing your communication skills and getting what you need from a situation. Resilience, I'm sure there are so many examples that you can draw on. So if you feel comfortable to, and you think it's going to support you kind of showing that particular strength or that value, absolutely do. I think for us as well, we want to see who individuals are. So whether that's talking about, your friends and family, or what you do on the weekends, or hobbies or charities that you work with, whatever it is, those are all things that all, employers want. They want to know who you are. We're not looking for, carbon copies of, 1,500 grads into our intake. So it's really drawing on, your unique skills and strengths and using those examples where you feel comfortable to.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really helpful. Yes, I guess it's where it's relevant as well, isn't it? So make sure it's definitely good to talk about if you're comfortable doing that, but where it answers the question too, I guess. So yes, absolutely. And sort of sort of link to that last question about thinking about qualities that might come from, sort of having a disability or related to it. Is there anything that you can think of that you value in particular in employees that have disabilities? So yeah, thinking about if there's any examples you have of people in your organisations.
I think it's been touched on in a response that lots of people have given, but just to say, in my opinion, disability and illness and trauma, they're not superpowers. It's not something that people should be sort of feeling lucky to have experienced or anything like that. But it is hard not to admire people who have to overcome different adversities, and yet they've retained compassion, they've retained a sense of humour, they have the resolve to keep going, and they're all qualities that make you a very good candidate for lots of different jobs. And ultimately, everyone benefits from having you in the room when you have those qualities, especially when you're empowered to bring your perspective into the mix. And I'll say in my experience that those who have lived with a disability or chronic illness and trauma typically are advocates, whether they mean to be or not. They're people who have seen almost behind the veil of neurotypicality, and they see what a lot of people overlook about the experience of others. And when you can tap into that as a business or as a team or just as yourself, for someone experiencing that, it does help to make the world more accessible. And as has been said in lots of different ways, that benefits everyone. And just to sort of come back to, in terms of values as a person with disabilities, I think actually I just want to recognise the value. Oh, I'm sorry, my lights are switched on. The value of a company that's willing to have that conversation, and that actually the stigma has moved very far away from don't mention it and it's a bad thing. And I think actually, as much as we may believe that companies are very hard to talk to, it's actually, in my experience, becoming that unresponsive and uncommunicative employees are really more the problem. Not the problem, but more the sort of the stumbling block in their own journey. I think as has been explored in lots of different ways through this conversation, there are sources there to help you. There are people there who are going to advocate for you. There are legal sort of acts, and there are resources and funding that are going to support you. So just to recognise that actually, so I'm someone who experiences a lot of imposter syndrome, feeling like I don't have a typically presenting disability, and obviously grew up with a very different idea of what that meant. So just to say that ultimately we need to sort of embrace that the stigma is fading and just participate in what we want to see and allow people who are participating to really do it their way. So hopefully that wasn't too much trouble with it.
That's amazing. Thank you. So many good points there. You're quite right that when we're seeking to empower people to talk about disability, we do need to remember that some people might not view everything about their disability as a positive. Often there's loss and challenge and all of those. So it is getting that balance right between acknowledging that, but also then seeing actually everyone can benefit when we have a chance to thrive as well. So definitely, thank you. So helpful. And I think that might be a good point to stop the recording.